Hello, welcome to Cade's Kaleidoscope podcast, your resource for holistic health, sobriety, and travel. My name is Preston. I'm talking today with, your name is Cynthia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm here with Cynthia and also
Crystal.
And we were sitting on an Amtrak train crossing Glacier National Park right now, absorbing the beauty and multitasking. So Cynthia is a scientist, and could you explain, first of all, exactly what your job title is or what you do for work?
I have a degree in food science and a master's from University of California, Davis. And I've had a somewhat traditional career working at big names like General Mills, but the last place I was at Novartis. But that's been years ago because I've been a caregiver for a long, long time to a spouse who was inexplicably ill. And I have spent since '06, taking care of him. And it wasn't until 8 years in that we went basically non-conventional, because conventional medicine had said, we don't know why you're in pain. Good luck with that. We went to every specialist. We followed it very traditionally, Western medicine.
Yeah.
And they just finally said, we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And fortunately, we did. My mom gave me a book that she'd seen on PBS, and it was on functional medicine. And I went, because I had started researching, if Western medicine can't do it, I've got to go alternative or find something that still isn't, it's still in the preliminary stages and not necessarily approved by the AMA to be used in all practicality, because he was in high pain, very depressed, and, he couldn't live like that. He was he was 48 when this started.
Wow.
And, with no.
He was diagnosed with?
They didn't know. They called it chronic pain syndrome because they didn't know why he was in pain.
Okay.
And which interfered with his sleep, which interfered with his brain functioning.
Yeah.
And he became weak, and I couldn't get him moved out of the chair half the time.
Wow.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, and you had explained earlier before I started recording, you had explained that Western medicine is really good at some things. But when it comes to diabetes, we don't have...
Well, the book was functional medicine by Mark Hyman, who has written numerous of these things, and he had his own clinic in Massachusetts. He's currently at the Cleveland Clinic Department of Functional Medicine. He's the head of that, and it's, I believe, the first department of that in the United States. Functional medicine was basically invented by MDs back in the 90s, like 1993, I think Jeffrey Bland and Leo Galan. They said Western medicine is very good at dealing with many, many things. They wouldn't want to live without it. That's their practice. But it's not really great with chronic diseases. When you get diabetes, when you get, autoimmune disease, cancer, heart disease and all that, they're great at trying to fix things or stop the symptoms, Alzheimer's, but they don't cure it. Yeah. Basically, it is not in their toolkit to cure it. And there's always been, of course, talk about nutrition and other things should be able to help you. And so that kind of led me on this journey of how to get my husband well. And we came across our first FM who diagnosed him, and then we went on to, other people tried helping. A naturopath helped, said, hey, he's allergic to gluten. We did a quick test on that, the standard Western one.
Great. And while we're on the subject of gluten, I wanted you to go into a little detail about what you had explained earlier, your own journey of dropping gluten from your diet, or at least reducing it. And do you want to explain any of that? Or you
Sure.
can go into as little or as much detail as you want.
I dropped gluten partially because my husband was off of it, and if he sees it, he wants to eat it. Seafood diet. So, but I would indulge when he wasn't around. I'm sorry, I like my croissants and pizzas as much as anybody else. But one time when I did this, because there's a really great bakery near me, and they had all of their beautiful breads for fall. We're talking chocolate bread, or their their walnut raisin bread. These are all their fall breads. And I was slathering butter on toasted bread, and I realized I got my winter skin back. So I went, I'm sensitive to it. Okay, it's not bad. I'm just sensitive. But then eventually I started with the second FM that both my husband and I go to, because I was getting very run down. I was beginning to lose my ability to recall words and to add numbers in my head. Things were getting super scary for me. And so I saw her, and even without testing me, she said, get off of it. Get off those two, get off that and dairy. Those are only major food restrictions besides the usual alcohol, sugar, and caffeine. And let's cut back on the fruit, because I was a fruitaholic.
Okay.
And she said, just eat berries.
Just eat berries.
Just eat berries. Don't eat any of ones. And let's just get some things under control. Let's see how it goes. Of course, I was in the usual denial, grief, and anger that I was this far off. I'm a food scientist. I'm supposed to know better, but, doctor heal thyself kind of thing. Sure. So when I finally committed for 2 months to be off of gluten, my memory came back. I could recall words again. I wasn't stumbling around going, I know that word. Why can't I think of it? All of that came back, and my brain hasn't been bad ever since I've stayed off of gluten. But I was tested another year later, because she still wanted to know what else was going on, because my labs were not coming out as clean as she wanted. So she was peeling away what was going on like an onion, going, okay, this, and different symptoms disappeared over time. So I was tested using a Cyrex test, about 180 different things, and it confirmed my gluten. But I was also allergic to shrimp, which I had an inkling of. That's a long story. Pineapple, which I had an inkling of. But what surprised me was bananas, red and white wine, and some whitefish, not halibut and cod, but like Lake Superior whitefish, that kind of fish. I mean, all the proteins are slightly different, and that's what your body is having immune reaction to. And this was an IgA type of a test. So it's pretty specific, and there's a standard deviations of whether you're definitely maybe and so. And if you're kind of in that maybe sensitive area, because since then, with my diet being as cleaned up as it is, I now know when I'm reacting to something like, I can have legumes maybe twice a week, and I'm fine. But I would have never known that because I don't eat a whole heck of a lot of them, in my diet. But I did add them in when other things were cut out, and I went, oh, okay, something's not happy here. So more recently, this FM I'm seeing said, go read the book, The Walls Protocol. Are you familiar with that? WAHLS Protocol, published in 2014. She's got a new edition in 2020. She's a doctor in Iowa City. And she was diagnosed with MS, I believe, in 2000. And she went through all conventional medicine. She could afford to go to the Cleveland Clinic, top of the line, and did everything they told her to. And she still found herself in a wheelchair, and a reclining wheelchair. And yet she was still trying to be. She's the head of head medical officer at a VA hospital, and she's a professor, trying to do all that. And so she put herself into the research mode and started treating herself, and came up with a protocol, diet, mostly diet, but there's exercise and sleep and stress reduction in there. And she wanted this protocol simple enough and inexpensive enough that anybody could do it, because most of her patients were VA. I mean, a lot of them are disabled. A lot of them aren't working. A lot of them are living off of, their benefits. And so she had to come up with something that they could do. So it's very approachable. It's very modifiable, because there's different levels at it. If you ask her where she went, she's at level 3. And, at the beginning, they just started saying, cut out the main things, gluten and dairy, and eat more vegetables, like nine cups, not 9 servings, not 5 servings, 9 cups. That's a lot of vegetables. When you get the second one is a very nutrient dense paleo, and the third one is kind of a cross between a paleo, but it does get your body into ketogenesis. So it's a cross between those two, but with slightly different needs. But she goes, everybody in FM in functional medicine would say, whatever protocol or whatever diet has to be tailored for you and your specific purposes, because you have different DNA. And that she gets into epigenetics, where you can turn that on and off by your environment, whether it's your food or the chemicals in the air or whatever your lifestyle is causing these things to change. You have to treat the individual. And even though I have these 3 outlined here, you need to modify them for you. And there are people other than MS. That's what she has, and so it's sort of MS oriented and autoimmune oriented. People have said, I've got cancer, I've done level 3, I've got Parkinson's, my husband, at least, his symptoms are beginning to go down. Other people, it hasn't quite worked for, but there may be some other underlying things, and she's like, you've got to get to somebody, other than trying to self-treat, try and find somebody that can help you with this.
That's fascinating. Thanks so much, Cynthia. But I wanted to ask you, Cynthia, just to clarify something about sleep. Sleep is obviously important to the human body, and you had spoken earlier about what exactly the brain does during sleep.
I got this out of Dale Bredesen's book. He has a book called, I can't even think of the name right off the top of my head, but the underlying thing, it's the only book out, it's the original book out there that is on how to reverse Alzheimer's. And he's a neurologist, he's been studying for 30 years, and he, by certain accidents and whatever else in his labs, but good scientific work, has figured out how the body should, the different things your body needs to have in balance before Alzheimer's can come, before you have whatever is Alzheimer's is. And there's like over 30 different things. And he explains in his book that sleep is very, very important, because during the night is when your brain cleans itself up. He likened it to waves, that all the interstitial spaces sort of open up, and then the fluids come in, and then the fluids go out. And if you don't have good sleep, that doesn't happen, and everything accumulates. And when the junk accumulates, your brain, it's like having a dirty room or something. You can't live in a dusty, dirty room, and if this stuff can get really bad, you can imagine everything going wrong. And so his recommendation was, have about 12 hours at night, 12 to 16, depending upon what your genetics are, but 12 is like the minimum. If you're facing this and want to make sure that you have not eaten for those 12 hours, so like 3 hours before you go to sleep.
So intermittent fasting.
Yeah, it is intermittent fasting. That was the first time I came across it. And Walls does the same thing. She suggests about 12 hours at night. He was going 16 if you're ApoE4 to have that same thing happen. So yeah, it is intermittent fasting, but that was one of the main reasons, was to get your brain clear. There's other things intermittent fasting can do too.
Yeah, that's great. If you have any questions at some point, I can hand the phone to you. You could ask a question, and then we can carry on. Do you have any questions now? Okay, yeah. Intermittent fasting is pretty important to me. About a little more than a year ago, I became obsessed with bodybuilding, of all things. And obviously, I'm not a bodybuilder when you look at me, but I do exercise with bodybuilders, and I follow a pretty strict diet. Well, a relatively strict diet.
What do you eat?
I'm vegan right now.
Okay.
I found a vegan diet that works for me. Although I'm not a dogmatic vegan. Today I ate some baklava and I shared some with her because it was gifted to me, and I figured, it's baklava.
What's a baklava that you couldn't eat?
Ghee.
Oh, ghee. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was thinking butter, not ghee.
Right. Yeah, and so I found a diet that I think is working pretty well for me. I've seen some hypertrophy. Is that the word for growth of muscles? Is
Yeah.
Hypertrophy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hipertrofia in Spanish. I'm thinking in Spanish, so it's coming to me like I'm speaking English as a second language. So intermittent fasting was an option for me as I was in a cutting phase. A lot of bodybuilders, what they do is they go through 4 months, 5 months of bulk, or even a year bulking, and then a year of cutting, a shorter time period cutting. So you bulk up, you eat an abundance of calories, you eat a minimum of 500 extra calories a day, sometimes 1,000 extra calories a day. And as long as you're eating a variety, you can do that on a vegan diet. You can get enough rice and beans. You can eat enough legumes to get enough protein to do some serious bulking. And so that's what I did. And after several months of bulking, I went on a diet, and that's the cut. And that's where you leave a deficit of between 200 to 500 calories a day. And every day you eat with leaving a deficit. So your body, but if you eat enough protein, and this is where protein shakes come in handy for bodybuilders. If you eat enough protein, your body will burn the fat but maintain your muscles. And so that's important for a lot of people. You don't have to be a bodybuilder to benefit from this. And so I drank protein a few days the only calories I consumed were a little fruit and protein shakes. And I did notice some like that I burned off a little tiny bit of fat that I had, and I maintained the muscle. So, do you have? You had mentioned earlier, is it your husband who is almost vegetarian at this point?
No. He's
Was there
definitely a meat. He's a carnivore.
Yeah. Was there somebody you were talking about that a vegetarian diet was beneficial for some?
Well, this Walls has a lot of people who are vegetarians, and she herself was a vegetarian for 10 years. But she went off the deep end, and so a lot of this diet was oriented to people who've already fallen over the cliff. Okay. You haven't fallen over the cliff, and so you will probably stay healthy most of your life because you're paying attention now. Yeah. I've had a couple of decades beyond you of eating terrible, from either I didn't want to spend the money financially because I didn't have it, or just whatever. I did not make the right choices, and now I'm paying for it. And so all of these chronic conditions, once you've tripped them, it's kind of like you can become healthier and maybe control the symptoms, but you've already tripped those, and they're a part of me now. If I had never tripped them, and maybe I would not have, the dementia symptoms would not so easily come back. Bredesen, in his first publication in 2014 in the Journal of Aging, had 10 people with Alzheimer's that were tested on his first protocol, and 9 out of 10 reversed their symptoms. Now, a couple of people, they felt so good that, they were teachers or their own manufacturing companies or whatever. They were high-level people, and they thought, I'm well, I can go off the diet. And he was hoping that was true because, you can't stop somebody when they want to do that. But all of their symptoms came back approximately 2 weeks after they got off the diet. So they needed to be on it for life. And there is one sad anecdote in his story in his book, that one woman who responded very, very well to this protocol, and she was elderly, but she decided after she did it, I don't care anymore, much to her children's dismay. But it is your personal choice. And she said, I don't care anymore. I'm just going to go ahead and eat the way I want to eat. I enjoy my food that much. So I don't have much fear for you in the least, because of your age and everything else. And you probably will never trip what I tripped in my life. But everybody is different, and she's got this protocol. Like most of those vets are very, very, ill from different reasons, and she's got to try and build their bodies back up the best way she can. And this covers, her first book was called Minding My Mitochondria. Okay. So that one really goes into all the biochemistry, which at least, some people like that was too difficult to read. I'm sorry, I had to study that in school. So yeah, I kind of knew what she was getting into. But she laid out, this is why you need this. This is why you need this. And she's modified that. But she started with the most basic, studies and information from, I think that's a 2008 book or 2010 book, something like that. She's at 2021. She's modified things. People keep asking her, why are you doing this? She goes, well, I've learned some more stuff, so I got to keep going,
That's great. So you were explaining how some family members have caught on and followed.
Yeah, most people can be successful if their family and friends are supportive of their diet. Yeah. If you have family members that are sabotaging you, like, oh, you can eat this, it's really hard. At least she asked the family members, if you're going to eat that, don't do it in their presence, in their sight. Try and do it someplace else, but don't do it in their sight if you want to be supportive. And a few people have said, you know what? I thought, I'm 27 years old. I figured I was pretty healthy, but I've never slept so well. I've never had this much energy before. Yeah. So there is something that may be missing from their diet that they were getting this way. It doesn't hurt to explore that.
Yeah. And fasting and also intermittent fasting are remarkably healthy practices for anybody. And it's nothing new. This has been practiced for as long as human history. There's a religious aspect. A lot of people fast for religious reasons. And I think there's obviously a lot of health benefits associated with certain practices of fasting and intermittent fasting. So there's a nice taking a break just to enjoy. I wish this were a video podcast because you could see what we're seeing right now. We're in the observation deck of an Amtrak empire builder in Montana and the Glacier National Park, and so we're
Seeing some of the private cabins, and we're seeing one of the chalets.
Yeah, there's a chalet, the Isaac Walton Hotel we're crossing right now. Beautiful out here. Yep, some people sitting on the lawn of the hotel waving to the train goers. And change of subject at this point. So we're talking about somebody who had parents on one side who were MDs and parents on the other side who were Native American.
After the Civil War, and I forgot, they even held some like posts with these, they weren't the Surgeon General of the United States, but they held posts that were fairly recognized at that time. And it ended up that he realized it took him years of resisting this, that somebody finally explained to him that he had this ability recognized by his native side of seeing the spirits of plants. And no matter where he went, he could see, an oak spirit would look like this, and a pine, he could see the differences, and he was like, well, what do they want? And he says that they don't want anything except to be left alone. But since you can see them, and you recognize that if you want to do anything at all, you have to speak for them. Because they can't speak for themselves, and man is just plowing right over the top of them. So he went on that long journey of understanding that. And I came across him because the natural path that we were seeing had suggested reading a particular book by him called Healing Lyme, Lyme, Lyme disease. And it was the only one I had read where he theorized about how we have many invasive species and why they go around the world, and what role could they actually play in all the different plants in dealing with a lot of the diseases that are spreading all over the world. And it was an interesting book. But he also had a book on fasting, which I thought was interesting on what he thought, here's the different levels of fasting and why you might want to be doing it. He has a third book out on fermented drinks, more like mead, all of the old European drinks and the health benefits of them and the historical about them and how to do them and use them, all of that whole area. And that's a huge area that's become, this book is I think at least 10, 15 years old. I think now it's becoming popular. But the fasting book, I'm not really familiar with it because I didn't jump in and do it. I don't learn until I actually do it. The main thing I got out of it was know what your body already is, because you can do harm if you don't know your own body. And so it would help if you had some guidance, because if if your body isn't ready to, like if you're very sick and think that fasting is going to help you, it may hurt you because your body can't handle that. Like the gentleman here, Preston, giving this podcast, super healthy looking guy. I don't think he'd have a problem with fasting, but if you already are ill, know where you are on that health scale and just don't go. I've done the same thing. I've dived into things and went, oh, that didn't go too well, and you don't want to go backwards when you're trying to go forwards. So I would just throw a word of caution in there on that and read as much as you can and find other people. Don't just get this blanket. It'll work for you. If someone's telling you it's a cure, Walls and Bredesen, none of them are saying that. They're saying this is a process of the body that you have to understand.
Yeah.
It's work.
And if you're in the United States and you want to fast under doctor's supervision, I know there's True North Medical Center, which is in Southern California, where they're a nonprofit, so it's affordable. And what they'll do is they will have a team supervise you while you fast, and they'll provide activities for you so you don't get bored. And basically they keep you busy doing social things and health related therapies so that you forget you're even hungry. And that's a great place for doctor supervised fasting. And you touched on an important note. I'm not encouraging anybody to fast without the supervision of at least their own family doctor, but even better to have a specialized doctor to supervise. And I've made the personal decision before to fast, and I've been 3 days drinking only water and orange juice, and for me I was fine doing that, and I enjoyed it, and I felt I was a very religious evangelical Christian at the time, and I felt both the spiritual and the physical benefits of fasting. But yeah, I was taking a risk. I was in college, and that's all to say. Definitely use caution if you decide to fast. And I could go on a little more from what I heard on the Rich Roll podcast about fasting. There have been patients at True North in Southern California who have entered with severe health issues and have been able to be healed in pretty serious ways. Not like there's a patient with a tumor, and the tumor, when a person fasts, you would think, just by common sense, you would think that if you fast for 10 days, you may be lucky if you reduce 5 to 10% of your weight. And if you have a tumor, then your tumor would shrink by the same ratio of 5 to 10%. But because the body's amazing, in this case, the tumor actually lost more than the rest of the body. You can look up the article called Yvonne, Changing the Course of Lymphoma. You can also hear about this on the Rich Roll podcast. And the source of that information is from healthpromoting.com. But I can say this is coming from the founder of True North in Southern California, which is a nonprofit. And anyway, yeah. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us. Anything else on the subject of?
I wouldn't call it expertise. This is from doing a lot of reading and talking to other people. I'm looking for a pathway out of my husband's misery. I was looking for a pathway to health from my different symptoms. And I think everybody wants that to some degree. But whether you're willing to do it and commit to it it is work. It is work, and you're not alone in saying, I can't do this, or that's really hard to do. But if you understand why you're doing it, and what could be the possible results of, it depends on how old or young you are. When you're very young, you think you're living forever. When you're middle age or older, in this society, when things don't seem quite the same, you may want to be exploring this before it becomes full-blown whatever. You don't want to be one of those people taking 30 pills a day.
Cynthia, do you think you can talk about some of the foods that you should avoid as part of this health journey?
Trans fats, obviously. Okay, if you've read Food Rules by Jeffrey Pollan, he said, eat food, mostly plants, not too much. I would think that was his thing there. It's a sweet book because as a pithy journalist, a wordsmith, he could boil a lot of things down to things that people understand, like don't eat anything your grandmother wouldn't recognize. If there's a word in there, like how many people here know what carrageenan is? I do, but how many people know what carrageenan is? If you don't recognize it, maybe you shouldn't be eating it. If it's a chemical term, you should be. They want you to eat whole foods. So that's one side of it. But then you go to things that, why can't I get all my nutrition from what's out there? People did all the time. Our food is not quite the same as your grandparents ate. Since the 1940s, post-World War II, the explosion of pesticides and chemicals, which you are not tested before they're used, it's always after the fact. Or if they test it one at a time, and not if you're exposed to hundreds. The Environmental Working Group had a little 10-person study of, actually the 10 people were fetuses that they took blood from, and they all have a couple hundred chemicals in them that shouldn't be there, that they're getting through the uterine blood of their mother. So we're starting at a deficit from when we're born, and then we're exposed to a million other things. The cows that we eat, the fatty acid content has changed, and it's no longer, most of them aren't grass-fed, they're corn-fed. And corn, yes, is a type of grass, for one person that wanted to correct me. But the problem is the fatty acid content is different, and we used to eat omega-6 to omega-3 1-to-1, and with it getting primarily omega-6, we're getting more like 20-to-1. So remember in the 60s they said for heart patients, don't eat beef, don't eat this, your cholesterol's going to go bad? It was, probably should be, don't eat the corn-fed beef. Grass-fed beef is probably fine. Remember we went on a low-fat, high-carb phase in here in the 90s? That is where all of the obesity and stuff really went through the roof in the country. People want the good old days. 1950s, 10% of the population was overweight and even smaller obese. Now we're 50-60% of the population's overweight, and actually it's 70%, and the obesity range is more like 30%. It keeps going up because this stuff is mentally, physically addictive. We love this food. And some people want to say, oh, the food industry did this to us. It's like, we all make our own choices here, guys. You've got to think about what's there. And you knew that vegetables were good for you, but how many vegetables do you eat? So we've eaten ourselves into this state. So one of the primary ones that actually is a problem for those of us who've gotten ill is gluten. Now, there's people who can eat gluten perfectly fine, but genetically some of us have a problem with it, and other of us have had gut problems where it crossed our barrier, and now we've had an immune reaction to it, which is what probably happened to me. Because my husband's family definitely has a genetic problem with it. Me, I think I was circumstantial. So I can clean my gut up, and the stuff won't get across as easily, but gluten's special. It can open the gates. And it's just, we're used to repairing that. And so then but if you eat it constantly, then those are open all the time. So gluten is one of those things that, just like corn, it's in everything. I mean, the food makers took what anybody would do. What's the cheapest way we can make this so we don't have to charge as much, and we make some profits off it? Okay, and you know how hard it is to get gluten out of your diet? And if you had to take out corn, like my husband does, take out corn out of your diet. It's in everything. And then you try and go back to eat, just clean vegetables.
Yeah, you had mentioned whole foods, and for the audience that's less familiar with this, when you think of whole foods, you want to be shopping on the walls of your grocery store. You want to buy a food that is one food. You want to buy carrots and lettuce and spinach especially, and you want to buy food that's just the food in its natural state. That's your whole foods. And you can cook. If you learn how to cook, if you go vegan, you better learn how to cook, and you better learn how to meal plan. I do recommend you try going vegan, because for me it's been working, but I don't recommend it. I don't think it's right for everybody. But whole foods, you want to shop. You want to shop on the walls of your grocery store. You want to avoid packaged foods. You want to especially avoid microwavable.
Yeah, some people have a rule of thumb of, if there's more than 5 ingredients on a package, because not all of us are ever going to get rid of all of our packaged foods. No more than 5 ingredients, and don't let that be sugar in there as one of those ingredients. We want our sugar, it's the amount. And if you've not heard of the, the rule of 150 or something like that. Back in 1815 or 1850 or so, we used to eat about 15 pounds of sugar a year. Okay, in the United States. 100 years later, we're eating 150 pounds of sugar a year. Our bodies weren't designed to deal with that kind of an overload. I mean, you guys think Little House on the Prairie. How often did she get a sugary treat? Christmas, that was, maybe they went to the store and they got that penny candy at one time.
Yeah, your SOS is your salt, oil, and sugar. Those are 3 foods you want to keep minimal.
Yeah. On the oils, if you're going to have oils, make it cold pressed. A lot of them are chemically treated or whatever else. And if something like canola oil, 90% of it's GMO actually.
What is an example of a cold pressed oil?
Well, it has to say cold pressed on it. Olive oil can be cold pressed or it can be machine done. Okay. So you want to watch the temperature, because oils are from the fatty acids that they have in them. That's why they're so liquid. That also makes them more reactive. And so when they're under heat, they change and they're not as good for you. So cold press keeps it more natural, or more of its original state is what I should say. So that's why when they talk about which oils are best to cook with, you want to look at their flash points and when they change. So the hard fats that you see in lard or you see in coconut oil, they have different chains of fatty acids. They're shorter, they're different, and and avocado oil is an exception. They can take the higher temperatures. Never cook with olive oil, ever. I don't care whether it's good olive oil or bad olive oil. Don't cook with it. It can't handle it. Use that
would
in
you
salad dressings or something like that. But don't heat it, is what I'm trying to say. Don't add heat to olive oil. And they have, if you go online, you just look up, flash points or something like that with oils. There are tables and lists out there all over the place to tell you which is which. And I would say, I keep avocado oil for that high-end cooking, and I keep coconut oil, virgin, organic, and I keep some organic expeller pressed olive oil. Those are the three main oils. I have a little bit of sesame oil, mainly just for the flavor in Chinese cooking.
I wanted to ask specifically about coconut oil because this is a polemic debate in the vegan,
because of where it's from,
and also it's high in saturated fats, right?
It's high in medium chain fatty acids, and those medium chain fatty acids can do two things. One, it can feed some of your gut microbiome. It's we're talking caprylic, butyric, and I forgot the third one. But they're like a C8 to C10 in that range. I think it's C6 to C10. These are not the really short ones and not the really long ones, and that's why they're like this. But your gut, it helps feed some of your gut microbiome. The other thing is, according to Walls, it helps you get into ketosis better. So she's a heavy coconut oil person. I use some. I also render a lot of my meat. I save the fat, but I'm getting grass-fed beef or I'm getting organic beef. I'm trying to get better at that. Like my bacon's uncured, no nitrates, and I actually do mine without sugar. So, and I just found a CSA that does this type of local farm meat.
What is the CSA?
The community farm groups. Oh, cool. So you can subscribe to them and then have, there's no middlemen. They are the middlemen. It's delivered to, in my city, Minneapolis, there's 32 different delivery locations. So you go to somebody's house or a business and you can pick up your box set once a month.
Nice.
And you can order that. And all they have different farmers they work with, like a co-op. So they got, they do lamb, they do beef, they do pork, they do eggs, they do chicken. And it looks like an excellent way of doing things.
Sure. Yeah, any other questions on the diet?
I actually do. I noticed that you're eating coconut yogurt and kombucha, and so I'm just wondering what you would suggest to promote a healthy gut microbiome.
Well, Star Tribune article in the newspaper I have upstairs. They just published a study whereby they put, I think they had 20 people, 20 healthy people, and they put half of them on a diet where they increased their fiber content to, I think they, whatever was normal to like double that. And then the other group, they didn't increase it, but they made them eat. For breakfast, I think it was 1 cup of yogurt. They didn't say what kind. This is a short newspaper article. Be wary of newspaper articles. I sometimes read them and they get the facts wrong. So always see if you can find the original data from the original article to know what you're talking about. The second, for lunch, they added in a cup of kombucha, and then for dinner they added a cup of kimchi. And then they tested their gut microbiome and their inflammation numbers afterwards. And the microbiome for those who doubled their fiber did not increase. It remained exactly the same. But the ones that had the fermented foods, that increased. Now they knew, because they were testing which bacteria, yeast, and fungi were in their guts. And the ones that grew were not the ones that were exactly in the products, but something in them was encouraging the gut biome to grow. But both groups had a decrease in inflammation. So there's not to say that fiber wasn't good, but they were just curious about the gut microbiome. That's one of the earlier studies, one of the first studies I've seen where they actually were trying to connect the two, because before that it's just anecdotal. Everybody knows you can do that. I had a conversation with my FM because I'm trying to add this in, and she had said she thought for me, a cup of, eat a variety of them, but so a couple tablespoons of this, that, and the other thing, but get about a cup a day. And she thought that would be enough versus this study said 3 cups.
A cup a day of what?
Fermented foods. Okay. So she goes, yeah, throw in your, if you want kimchi, if you want yogurt, if you want kefir, if you want miso, if you want natto, if you want tempeh, all those things. Yeah. As long as you don't have a reaction to it. So.
That's great. That's great.
How can you tell if you're having a reaction to something?
Oh God, you wouldn't. If you don't feel good when you're, eat one. Don't throw them all in at once. Okay, start with one. And reactions can sometimes happen up to, 3 days after.
Right.
Okay, so don't add anything new for 3 days. And if you don't think you have any symptoms that you're objecting, you're probably okay. Now that's not 100% true, but you're probably okay. Because like some people have I'm allergic to bananas, but I have no idea what my symptoms are, but it's probably all cellular, but it's not something I can see. So I just stay away from bananas. But I can eat actually cooked bananas. I can eat plantains, but for some reason the raw ones, and I don't know why. I don't love bananas, so why did I become allergic to bananas? I don't know. I'm sure it had to do with time, place, and event, and I don't know what to connect it to. I just know what is.
Yeah, and you mentioned tempeh. I wanted to jump in with a little product placement because somebody who's very integral to the start of my podcast, she lives in Argentina and she has started a tempeh business. It's starting right now. It's a startup, and you can follow her on Instagram, Tempeh para siempre. So if you're in Mar del Plata, Buenos Aires province of Argentina, there's a little product plug. So far, I don't have any paid sponsors, but I am open in the future of this podcast to have some advertising, only for products like tempeh or health products that I really believe in, or services that this podcast is trying to support. And so you had asked about kombucha, tempeh, and yogurt. So these are all fermented. Okay, is that right?
Yeah, they're all fermented. Yeah. And the one thing that Walls and many of these practitioners encourage is you do it at home. Mm-hmm. Making kefir is easy. Making, yogurt is easy. Yeah. And so you can avoid, in the grocery store, there are many brands of yogurt out there, alternative yogurts, yeah. And they all have all kinds of things thrown there, starches and gums and whatever else. And she had me on a diet to clean my gut, and she basically said, take a look outside. She said basically, I don't want you on those because we're trying to kill everything off in your gut. I could only find one yogurt that didn't, so I have to go make my own yogurt.
Yeah, and a gut biome is important for anybody. You can go down a serious rabbit hole of your gut biome, because there are at least thousands, but millions of organisms living in your gut?
There's 10 times. You have a certain number of cells, and there's 10 times the number living in your gut. Yeah. And basically, we live in a symbiotic relationship. They break down a lot of the foods for us. They digest foods for us, and in digesting foods for us, they provide vitamin B12 and other things for us that we couldn't ordinarily make. And the problem is when your gut gets off and some of those die back and the ones that aren't quite so healthy start thriving, that's when you start having problems. And, you hear about the people that have all kinds of, the older people saying, I'm constipated, I have this, I have that. Usually that is a sign of something majorly going on there. And if you're not digesting your food, or just as importantly, if you're not removing toxins because you don't have the gut down there to do the job, you can imagine everything backing up and everything going wrong because your gut is not working.
Yeah, and there are lots of steps you can do in order to promote healthy digestion. And a couple suggestions I would give are make sure you're eating your food in a calm, relaxed state. Now, that's hard in the United States with the amount of stimulus we have. We got our cell phones, TV. Right now, we're snacking while we record this podcast. We're not exactly in a calm, relaxed state. I mean, I once lived in the home of a student at the Montessori school I worked at in Wenatchee, and this student was so thin. You know, his parents couldn't get any weight on him. That's typical. A lot of the young boys and girls, they just don't eat enough, or they got fast metabolisms, and so these parents were actually happy that he was eating while he watched TV and YouTube videos, because that way, that's something. If you watch television or watch something on the internet while you're eating, your body will eat more. You'll actually consume more by doing that. And so that's, if you got somebody you need to gain weight, maybe that could actually be helpful, but normally that would not be considered a healthy practice.
Yeah. For the majority of us in the U.S., we don't pay attention to our food. We eat on the run.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some places where you're not allowed to eat and walk at the same time around the world. And in the U.S., you know, we've kind of lost the tradition of sitting there looking at our food, realizing it's food, and enjoying what we have. And instead, we're used to the fast food, the fast, you know, any type of quick pickup delivery thing.
Yeah.
And it's not the same thing as being able to notice what your body is doing in that time and place. That's one of the reasons why I had to turn to my spouse when my kids were little and say, turn off the TV. No TV while, you know.
Yeah, and this is mindfulness. You know, mindfulness is an important. It's all the trend right now. Mindfulness. You can practice mindfulness while you eat. You can concentrate. You can go to a Vipassana retreat. You can meditate for 10 days, and it's important. It's a little challenging now that we've become accustomed to the amount of sensory input coming at us from all angles. It can be challenging to put the phone down for a full day, but
there are little things you can do. One of my latest homework from my FM, because stress is probably still the thing I have absolutely no good reaction to. I do not have good self-control. So she said, I want you to practice yoga nidra twice a day, just for at least 10 minutes, you know, when you wake up and at lunch. Did I do it today? No, I didn't. But, you know, I finally looked up and found a video that I could watch that spoke to me. I mean, this is very individual. Everybody has different beliefs and spiritual practices, but the main thing is finding what it is that it will take for you to spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes out of the day to say, hey body, it's okay. It's to relax for a bit and recoup, and you'll be better for it.
Yep, this is a call to inaction. This is a call to the whole world to meditate, and a call to inaction, because the more calmer you are, this is on the subjects of spirituality, this is something I'm certain of, is we are interacting, like the human race really is an organism. You could look at us as one organism with different facets, with different little ants in the ant hill right now, and we are connected. This is something I'm certain of. There is some sort of magical spiritual connection that you could listen to the 100th Monkey. You could read the book on the 100th Monkey, our actions all affect each other. And this is an episode of the podcast. We started out talking about health and gluten restriction, and now we're talking about the interconnectedness of the universe. Man, it's far out, but that's all to say. This, a spiritual practice, a meditation. You can sing "How Great Thou Art" if you're a Christian. You can sing the Hanuman Chalisa if you're a devotee of Hanuman. And anything else on the subject of?
There's a book I came across a couple of years ago called The Urban Monk. I can't remember the name of the author off the top of my head. He's out of LA. And he's basically, he is a monk. He was from LA. He went out, became a monk, came back. He goes, but you know, most people can't afford to do that. Go out, you've got a mortgage, you've got kids. So he wrote this book on 10 areas that we have a hard time with, either time management, stress, sleep, whatever. 10 different chapters on each of these, and with a kind of an anecdote about one person that had a problem in it and what they did about it. So then he goes explaining it both a way to fix it from the Buddhist standpoint, but a modern fixes for how you can do yourself. And there were little things on time management. Was, some lawyer who had no time for his family and kids and was overworking his people, and he told them every day, set your clock at 55 minutes. I want you to stop and ask yourself for 5 minutes, what am I doing? And answer that question, and do that all day long. And he pretty soon realized he was always running like crazy without even realizing he was running ramshot over everybody, including himself, and that he became mindful about what is it I really want. I actually want to spend time with my teenage kids. They did, I've been not seeing them grow up. He spent time with his wife. She didn't, spend money as much anymore because they had the family they wanted. His employees were happier. But it was just an anecdote, but it was just stopping and asking yourself, what am I doing throughout the day, until it became a habit, and until it became refocused.
Yeah. Do you have any questions on mindfulness or on the subject of mindfulness? There's a very, very ancient spiritual practice from somewhere in South America, I'm guessing, because I learned it in Spanish, the clave del sol, which is what you would explain, but a little emphasized. The clave del sol is ¿quién soy? ¿Qué estoy haciendo? ¿Y dónde estoy? So in English, that's who am I? Where am I? And what am I doing? And it's just a slight, variant on exactly what you would describe. So mindfulness, #mindfulness.
Which is a universe, shows how universal it is. You heard it in Spanish. He heard it in Asia.
Yeah, it is ancient, transcending of any religion. This is all common sense for a healthy human. So thank you so much for recording this episode of Cade's Kaleidoscope. And would you like any from my social media or this podcast platform? Would you like your email shared, or are you looking for? I mean, have you written a book?
No, I think I will be a novice all my life. That's one of those things. I don't. My mom was an RN. I never thought I would do medicine in any way, shape, or form. I didn't think. Even as what could I possibly do in helping people? I can share what I know, but I don't. Nothing I'm saying is original. I think people like Terry Walls or Dale Bredesen or even my FM. These people, they're the ones who are helping me.
Sure.
I'm just on a journey, and I hope everybody has a good journey through this life.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Cynthia. And thanks I'm sorry, I forget your name. Crystal, thanks for being our audience and asking some questions.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. This is Cade's Kaleidoscope podcast, your resource for holistic health, sobriety, and travel. My name is Preston Wade. The music you're hearing in the background is called From the Earth by Judson Crane. You can pre-order my first book by checking out. I'm on all the social networks. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and soon TikTok. The links will be included in the show notes. If you would like to have your content sponsored or included in this podcast, you can contact me. My email is cadespodcast265@gmail.com. Again, the email address is cadespodcast265@gmail.com. Anybody's welcome to reach out there if you got a question, comment, anything. Please do like, comment, and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast, and leave a review. That'll help our algorithm. That'll help make this popular. If you'd like to support this work or this podcast, you can send a tip through Venmo. The address to send through Venmo is pwade72@gmail.com. That's Papa Whiskey Alpha Delta Echo, and then just the number 72@gmail.com. You can also send a tip through Cash App, and the address for Cash App is $Preston Kennedy 72. And if you'd like to send a tip through PayPal, the email is the same as the Venmo one, pwade72@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for supporting us, and hope you have a great day. I'm working on a motto for this podcast, and the first one I've come up with is keep rotating your kaleidoscope.